Phoenix Children's Marketing, and I'm here with Dr. Carol Lewis, who is a neurologist specializing in headaches at Barrow Neurological Institute at Phoenix Children's Hospital. And today we're going to talk headaches. So feel free to add any questions you may have in the comments, and we'll be sure to share them. So starting out, Dr. Lewis, how common are headaches in children?
Headaches in children are very common. We see them, either in the inpatient setting, the outpatient setting, but just in general, we know that probably at least 25% of kids before the age of 7 or 8 have had a headache. Mm-hmm. By the time they get to be adolescents, at least 50% of kids have had headaches, and through high school, 75% have a headache of some kind. It doesn't always require even to see a specialist, but they complain of them. They're very common.
Mm-hmm. So how many different types of headaches are there? I know there's a lot, but maybe some of the most common ones.
The most common ones are sort of primary headaches. Headaches just for the sake of headaches. They can run in families or they can just happen, but the most common ones are either going to be tension headaches or migraine headaches. Mm-hmm. And then there's other more rare types that are more unusual, but in kids the most common types are going to be tension headaches or migraine headaches.
What kind of symptoms does each have?
They can both be severe, so that it's not necessarily how bad they are, but a tension headache is usually described by a child or an adult as something that just, it hurts in the head. It's often a pressure or a squeezing type of pain, and that's really what it is mostly. It hurts, and they are fairly uncomfortable, and they can be mild or medium or severe. Migraine has some specific features that we use as ways to diagnose migraine, where they usually have sensitivity to light or sound or smells, and it's all three. They don't want to be in a bright room. They don't want to be around people who are loud. They want to be in a quiet place. And there's usually some belly component. They either are nauseous or they might throw up, or at least they turn down food. So they just know instinctively that food is a bad idea. And those kind of features start telling us this is a tension headache or a migraine headache.
Okay. So what are the best medications for pediatric headaches? We have ibuprofen, aspirin, sleep, all the different kinds of treatments. What do you usually recommend?
I think the first thing we often recommend is trying to figure out why they have the headache. And a lot of times in kids, we can find those triggers, whether it's tension headaches or migraine headaches. They may realize that they forgot to have breakfast that day, or they've had no water all day long, or they didn't get enough sleep the night before. Just being low blood sugar can do it. So if you can find that may be why somebody has a headache, you can say, okay, we need a little food, we need to get out of the heat, we need to get out of the stimulation. So the first thing would be take away whatever the trigger may have been. And then sometimes that doesn't work enough, and it's still uncomfortable, and so then we think about if food and water and rest doesn't do it. Cool cloth. Again, sometimes people use heating pads or cooling pads. This can be the first thing. And in small children, we try to do that first. We'd rather do the non-medical things than doing the medical things. If it gets more severe, then we use things that are just over-the-counter, things like acetaminophen or ibuprofen, and using those appropriately and in the right doses and not very often can be very helpful.
So, if you're a parent at the pharmacy, should you be getting the children's Tylenol versus adult Tylenol?
It depends on the age range, certainly, and a lot of the bottles can talk about what the weight ranges are. But if your child can swallow pills, it's probably better to use the adult-sized dose. I usually am a proponent of using a good-sized dose, but not very often. It's the frequency that's a problem. Families who come to see me who've been giving ibuprofen every single day for 2 months for these headaches, there's a lot of potential side effects to that. Whereas using it once a month or twice a week, once in a while, if it works and they can get control and they can keep functioning, meaning school mostly, then using a reasonable dose of either ibuprofen or acetaminophen may be all they need.
So, you mentioned this a little bit, but are there things besides medication that parents can do to treat a child's headache? You mentioned sleep and making sure they have enough water and things like that. Are there any kind of other, homeopathic things that might help?
There's certainly some, again, trying to find the triggers and trying to find the things that make it, get rid of it. In Arizona, a lot of times it's heat, so bringing the kids in and avoiding those triggers if it's heat or if it's stress that causes a big There are some things that we know that if you're a little bit low in vitamin D, for example, there's some supplementation with vitamin D that can be helpful on a longer term basis instead of the time. Supplementation with magnesium and vitamin B2 can be helpful as well. But mostly it's just trying to make sure that they are away from the triggers. And that being said, taking them away from everything, of course, is too much. If school is loud and stressful, you can't necessarily take them out of school just for headaches.
Sure. So what kinds of things can cause or have an effect on headaches? You mentioned school, I assume also stress, weather, other illnesses or more serious problems. You know, are there things that parents should be aware of that may be triggering headaches?
Right. So if it's not just a primary headache, if it's not just headaches brought on by low blood sugar or dehydration or things like that. If somebody's has never had headaches and then all of a sudden they start having headaches, if they're having other symptoms too, if they're having fevers, if they're having fatigue, if they're having vomiting that's not related to the headaches, there can be other causes, and that would be something that they should see their primary physician and decide if there's more things that they look at. Most of the time, headaches are what we call episodic. It's an episode. It lasts for an hour to a few hours, and during that time they can be somewhat miserable during the time, and then the next day they're fine. And that recurrence of an episodic pattern where they have an episode which has, for migraines, they don't like the lights, they don't like the sound, they don't want to be around people, they lay down, they go to sleep, sleep helps, and the next day they're fine again. The first episode is scary to the parent, the 10th episode is less scary because they sort of know what to expect and they come back to normal. But if they come back to normal in between, if they're headache-free in between these episodes, then we're much less concerned that there's something worrisome going on.
Sure.
If they are normal in between.
So, you know, I'm sure that you hear this from parents quite often, that sort of balance between a child saying, I have a headache, and the parent saying, oh, you're fine, you just don't want to go to school. Or, you know, how do you balance that as a parent?
It can be hard as a parent, and it can be hard as a teacher. I think school nurses and kids have headaches, and you have to sort of figure out when they have headaches. And if a child only has headaches during math class, it may be that they don't want to go to math class. And keeping them home from that because math class is stressful is not going to be the answer because they have to do that. But at the same time, there's certainly some kids that I see in our office that have very severe headaches and very severe migraines, and maybe neither of their parents have ever had migraines.
Sure.
And they go to a school where they don't have a school nurse, and nobody's taking them very seriously. And so just validating that this is a real problem, we understand that you are not able to function well, and we can take it seriously, that it's not just a headache.
Right.
This is something that is keeping you from being a typical kid, and we can find out why it happened and what's going on, and take it seriously. And I think a lot of times that's one of the things that we can do, just recognize that this is something that is really changing their lives, change it for the better if you can make them less often, less severe, let them be normal kids and go to school.
Sure.
It's huge.
Sure. So one of our Facebook followers, Elizabeth, asked whether headaches can be tied to hormones, you know, especially in girls and women. Can this be a cause, and what can be done to prevent or lessen them?
It's a very good question because we know that in general, in adults, for example, migraines are much more common in women, and it's more common because there's that hormonal link. So certainly getting headaches on a monthly basis is very common in women. But men have migraines too, and they're not hormonal, but the percentages are interesting, are different. In kids who have not yet hit puberty, so the kids who are under 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, the male-female gender is equal.
Oh, sure.
So we see kids in our office for headaches and migraines, and it's about equal boys and girls who see them. So what that means is that partly when girls hit puberty, they start having some of their first headaches, and they start getting sometimes more significant headaches. And also that a lot of boys may have very significant headaches. They get better as they go through puberty. So I often can be a little bit reassuring with boys that they may be having very frequent headaches when they're 12 or 13. And we may have to do something about it to make them function better. But they may get to the end of high school and they become much less often.
Interesting. So, you know, is it a good choice maybe to give, teenage girl, have ibuprofen with her at school? I mean, just kind of be ready for it.
Right, and if girls certainly find that their triggers are their monthly cycles, then being aware of that and knowing to carry ibuprofen, or in a lot of schools, having that in the nurse's office and being able to go and ask for it. One of the things that we can do is try to make sure that the schools understand that treating a migraine early is so important, just as it would be to treat an asthma attack early or a seizure early or something else. And if the school does not do that, or if they say, I don't think this is significant enough for you and you should just wait, or you should go back to class or wait till the end of the day, it's going to get a lot worse. So we spend a lot of time educating teachers and giving letters and saying, take this medication, whether it's just ibuprofen or a prescription we give, at the onset of a migraine. So empowering the kids to know when their headache is bad, not being a hero, not waiting until it's real bad,
Right.
and being able to go to the school nurse or whoever's there, take their medicine, rest a little bit, and then go back to school, and not have to miss the whole day of school.
Sure.
That's our biggest goal. Is most of the patients I see are school-age kids. Their biggest job in life is to go to school, and so if there's something that's happening that's keeping them out of that, then we need to fix it.
Sure. And that was sort of it. One of my next questions is, should parents keep children home from school if they have a headache?
It's always an individual question.
Yeah.
It depends on the child and it depends on what's going on. A lot of our patients have very frequent headaches. They're having headaches once a week, twice a week, more often. You can't miss that much school. You're not going to move on and you're not going to progress well. So we want to try to find ways to make the headaches less often and less severe, and they can maybe go to the nurse if they have a breakthrough, an episode, take something, have a rest, get away from whatever it is, and then go back to school. So my goal is always to be in school as much as possible. If they have emesis or they're vomiting or throwing up, obviously that's a little harder to be in school. But sometimes we also can give medications that they can have at school to help with the nausea. And even just doing that, if I can give them something where they don't feel like they're going to throw up in class, they can go back to class and they can function better. And that's a big thing.
So it's probably a good idea for parents of kids with headaches to talk to the school nurse, the teachers, principals, whoever's necessary, to make sure they understand what the process is.
I think it's very important for the parent to be engaged, talk to the nurse. And a lot of families may go to charter schools where they don't have a nurse.
Sure.
And so that can be more complicated, but it's still something. Every school has some process, and it may be that they can't just bring in a bottle of over-the-counter, but if they bring in something that their primary physician or their neurologist writes as a prescription, it could be like anything else that it could be prescribed from their bottle.
Sure.
And so just being proactive and finding out where the resources are and what they can do.
Sure. So you touched on this just a little bit, but do headaches run in the family? If a parent has a headache, does that mean that their child is also likely to have headaches, chronic headaches?
Yeah, very much. We know that there is a genetic link for migraines. One of the first questions I often ask is, does anybody else have headaches in the family? And you often get the history of mom has the migraines and then the maternal aunt, maybe the maternal grandmother. And when that happens, if the child is having episodes that fit some of these things, it's a lot easier to say, that's what's going on, this is migraines. And you then won't need to do a lot of other studies and find ways to do it. It also can happen without a family history, or we may not know the family history. So I often tell the kids, the good news is we don't have a gene test to test for migraines. But at the same time, we don't have a gene test to test for migraines yet. Maybe we will someday. But we can't say for sure that's what's going on. It's based on lots of history. But I think that there's some pretty good studies to show that if a parent has migraine, they often recognize it in their kids younger. They understand what's going on. They get them to care a little bit earlier, and they can understand it. I think sometimes it's harder for the kids, again, who may not have a family history, and it takes them a little longer to get to see something.
Sure. So can children outgrow headaches? I mean, is that...
They definitely can. I think that it's probably a little bit more common in boys.
Okay.
Often the mom may have headaches. She didn't start them until after she maybe had her first child or later on. And then she has a son who has them early, 6 or 7 or 8. And it's unusual because it doesn't seem what they experienced. But it's the same process. And what we often find is that those boys may have it a little earlier and maybe a little bit more severe, but they tend to outgrow it a little bit. but we know they probably still have that genetic susceptibility,
Mm-hmm.
and they forget about it till many years later when they have kids,
Mm-hmm.
and then their daughters have headaches.
Sure.
So some girls too can get better with time,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly just educating them what their triggers are can make it much better.
Sure. So, excuse me. So, what if a parent has a child with recurring headaches? When's the point that they should seek help?
I think the biggest thing, again, for kids is school ability. If they are having an occasional headache after school where they could take something over the counter and not miss activities, then they often can just treat that at home with something over the counter or rescues, or seeing their regular primary care physician. But if it gets to the point where either over-the-counter medications are not working, or they're missing school or missing activities, or they're having to turn down events with their friends. Families have a lot of stories. They all go to the movies or they go to Disneyland and it's bright and it's loud and they have to go back to the hotel. And it's a tough thing to do if you miss the entire day of something. So when it's becoming disabling, when it is affecting somebody's life, then they really should maybe step it up a little bit and try to search out what's going on and how to make it better.
So you touched on this a little bit, but children can have migraines.
Yes.
And again, how does a parent know whether a kid is having a migraine versus maybe just the recurring headache or a tension headache? When it's more serious.
I think that the biggest thing is trying to find those features of migraines that we look at. So again, they can both be a bad headache, but the belly component, the not wanting to eat. So if a child can eat a pizza during their headache, it can still be pain, and it's still something we have to treat, but it's probably not a migraine. Whereas a migraine is going to be turning down food. So a lot of parents, especially boys, will say, my child is turning down food. Something's wrong. It's probably a migraine. If they eat fine the next day, that may be what's going on. So if they're turning down food, if they're not able to eat, and if they're taking themselves, even as a young child, taking themselves away from activities. So they're outside playing, they come inside, they're laying down, they put a pillow over their head, they don't want the light on, they want the television off. You're starting to recognize or infer it from their behavior that they're having sensitive light and sound. Then you're starting to recognize that those are some features that they have to maybe take a little bit more seriously and address.
Sure. So again, is it like 10 migraines? Is it like, when should you get help? When it's that serious?
Yeah, again, it can be kind of individual. If they are short once in a while, and often if the mom has migraines and they recognize it, or the dad has migraines, they can find ways to manage it. But if they're missing school, if they're missing, a couple of classes every week, or a day or two every week, or a number of classes per month, then they really need to recognize this is a problem. I've had some families who come to me for headaches, and it's the first time I've ever met them. They've never seen a specialist for headache, and they have school forms that are requesting multiple missed days. And they've missed lots and lots of days, and yet we haven't tried to fix it yet. So my first thing is, okay, we can sign the form to make sure they don't get in trouble, but our goal is to be back in school and to do as much as we can.
Sure.
So I would rather see patients before they've missed 20 days of school. I see kids in October and they've already missed 15 days of school. That's huge.
Yeah.
And so I would prefer seeing them in August when they've just